friends, and I wish you a very, very warm welcome again to Mr. Dilly Meets. My name is Mr. Dilly, and you are most welcome to this World Environment Day 2024 special. So World Environment Day is celebrated annually on the 5th of June, and from more than 150 countries take part across the globe in World Environment Day. In an effort to protect and restore the Earth, our planet, our home. Also, they try to, as a movement, encourage awareness and action for the protection of the environment, celebrating the power of governments, businesses and individuals, us, to create a more sustainable world. But before we meet my first guest, a little video from World Environment Day 2024 itself, which is being held this year in Saudi Arabia. This is a little video, tell you a bit more about it, and then we're back into the guests. So here we go.
Dear humankind, ours is not a short story. It's an epic tale written over eons. I, the Earth, have known you over hundreds of thousands of years. I've witnessed your achievements, your ingenuity, your pain. You are the first generation to fully understand my suffering, and you might be the last that could see my land revived. To all generations, the adventurers, the pioneers, the thinkers, and the dreamers, to all of you, let's find common ground in what unites us. Restore my lands for future generations. It really begins with a seed. Generation restoration begins with you.
So a short video there from World Environment Day, and their theme this year, which is Generation Restoration, about restoring natural habitats and land as we try to protect our planet more. My first guest is coming up in just a moment with her book, How to Teach Grown-Ups About Climate Change. She is an author, a frequent writer in National Geographic magazine, writer for National Wildlife and International Wildlife magazines. And this is her book, illustrated by, I think I'm saying his name right, Aaron Blecher, How to Teach Grown-Ups About Climate Change. So please welcome to Mr. Dilly Meets the wonderful Patricia Daniels. Hello, Patricia. How are you?
Hello. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm very, 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 very well, thanks. So you're coming to us from the US of A at the moment.
I am.
Your book, your wonderful book, which is absolutely fascinating, How to Teach Grown-Ups About Climate Change. It's the kind of the feel of it is how kids can tell grown-ups about these issues that the planet is all facing. How have you gone about that in the book? So how it's kind of like kids kind of talking to grown-ups and trying to persuade them. So how have you kind of used that kind of kid voice to kind of get that message across to grown-ups throughout that?
The book takes the point of view of a kid who's explaining to his somewhat clueless grown-up the facts about climate change, because it acknowledges a key fact about the climate crisis, which is that really kids are leading the way. Kids know their futures are on the line, and really they need to explain to older generations the facts of life right now. So the book takes you through the basics of climate change, what it is, where it comes from, effects on the earth, the effects on animals and plants. And then there's a lot about what we can do as individuals and as societies to join together to restore the earth. There's a lot of positivity in it.
So when you were researching this book, what other things kind of any facts that you didn't know about or kind of that really surprised you, I mean, positively or negatively in terms of the subject matter?
You know, I was surprised to come out of the book feeling more optimistic than I went in, because I think most of us know the dark news about climate change now, but we're not all aware of how many solutions are already out there and working, how much progress has already been made by entire countries. So I think it actually made me a little more cheerful about it made me a little more upbeat than I had been going in, to know that so many people are working so imaginatively to solve all the problems.
Have you got an example of that? I mean, what sort of things did you kind of discover? Because that is true, isn't it? I mean, we tend to focus on the negative bits, and that tends to be news in general, I think. But there's this incredible work people are doing. What sort of things did you kind of like really kind of strike you?
Well, so huge advances in renewable energy to the point where it's much cheaper than old fossil fuels, for instance. There are entire countries that are now running almost entirely on renewable energy. And the storage, batteries, all of these technologies have become easy and inexpensive now.
And this, I mean, a lot of this has happened in really recent times, isn't it? Kind of in really recent,
Yes.
last few years.
Just really in the last 10 years or so, there's been huge advances. So the solutions are right at hand. It's a matter really of political will, and it's not a matter of science anymore.
Which is amazing. I mean, that's the thing. One of the things about human beings, I suppose, is the good and the bad, is that, you know, obviously we create a lot of problems, but then at the same time create an awful lot of solutions to those problems. And you know, and there are a lot of people doing an awful lot of good work, which is always great to see. Throughout the book, as you mentioned, you've got sort of practical tips for children as well as adults to kind of do their bit. And we saw from that illustration there, and you've got even got incredible, you've got loads of links to resources at the back and books to look at and websites to look at, as well as a quiz at the back. Just off the top of your head, what are a couple of things that, you know, obviously the children watching in schools, could be individually or with their families or with their schools, that they could actually do to kind of help to contribute in some way? Is there anything that kind of, you know, sticks in your mind that they could do?
Well, I think kids and their adults need to think about it in two ways. They need to think about their personal carbon footprint, and they need to think about society at large. So food waste is an easy way to do some work at home where you can be more efficient about your food, waste less. You also need to think about raising your voice, speaking to the people who have the big carbon footprints. So your governments, your companies, people who are in charge will be able to make big changes, and you need to raise your voice and speak to them as well.
The hand over to Patricia now, who's going to give us a little taster of how to teach grown-ups about climate. Here we go. I'll hand over to you now, Patricia. Thanks.
A section about land use and food and ways that we can make things better. So this is from a section toward the end of the book. It's called What's for Lunch? Half of all the land on Earth, aside from deserts and ice sheets, is used to grow our food. Most of it is used to raise and feed animals such as cows, sheep, and pigs. Those are good sources of healthful protein, your adults protest. Maybe you'll say, but animals use an enormous amount of energy and resources. They need almost 100 times more land per protein produced than plants such as soybeans. Animals aside, almost all plant crops use fertilizers that contain nitrogen and powerful greenhouse gas. Once it's grown, our food is then moved from place to place in trucks or ships, processed, packaged, refrigerated, and trucked again to stores. Picture greenhouse gases wafting into the air the whole time. Then what happens? We throw it away. A lot of it anyway. A third of the food we produce doesn't even make it to our mouths. Some spoils before it even gets to the store. Some is rejected because it looks funny, no lumpy potatoes for us. Some just doesn't get used in time and is dropped in the garbage can because we think the sell-by date on the package means we have to toss it. In many places, most unused food ends up in landfills. There it gives off methane, which, as we remember from our cow burps, which we heard about earlier, is a strong greenhouse gas. This is one area where we can all make a difference. Then the farmers of the world will stop raising so many carbon-powered animals. Land once used for growing animal feed could go back to trees and shrubs and butterflies. We could stop billions of tons of greenhouse gases from entering the air. And I'd love to show you this picture that this illustration that Erin drew of ugly vegetables. They are adorable. You should bring them home from your grocery store.
That's fantastic. I mean, some of those facts there, and we one of those actually we're going to touch on a bit later on about the food waste. But I mean, as you said, that's something we can all actually do. Just look at what we're buying, where we're buying it from, what it looks like, how much we're buying, and then what we throw away, which is absolutely fascinating. Patricia, Thank you very much for being on, and we'll speak to you a bit later on. So round of applause, Patricia Daniels. So the next guest, award-winning author of the Legends of the Sky series, now back with I think it's the third book in her 4-book series. I'm here to talk today about this latest installment, Wildsmith, The Hidden Sea. Put your hands together. Big warm welcome to Liz Flanagan. Hello, Liz. How are you?
Hello, I'm well. Thank you for having me today.
Oh, no, it's an absolute pleasure to be on. Thank you very much for having you on. Where did that series kind of start with your character, and what's kind of, you know, where did we find her at the beginning, and how's that kind of progressed a little bit?
So yeah, it's a series about Rowan. She thinks she's just an ordinary girl, and then a war breaks out and she goes to the safety of the dark forest in book 1. She rescues some animals from poachers, they're baby dragons, and she realizes she has magic powers of healing animals and talking to them. So there's a rescue of a different magic creature in every book, but book 3 is different because she is the one who needs rescuing. And these books really arose from my love of wild places and wild creatures, which I think ties in with today's themes, because we do need to feel connected, I think, to wild places, and then activism can come from that, can't it? But the connection for me came first.
What do you think, sort of being out and about? Obviously for you, these ideas came from the book, or some of them. But what do you think being out and about in nature, and we are nature, we sort of forget that we're part of the same thing. But being out and walking around, what does it kind of can do? What did it do for you? What can it do for us? Do you think?
Absolutely right. So I started writing this series in that summer of 2020, and it really brought it home to me, you know, being allowed just one walk a day, how essential that is for my well-being. It feels like daily medicine, and I just felt better when I was out under the trees, and it made me notice it more than ever before. And I think now scientists have proved it, you know, being outside in nature, and it doesn't have to be a massive park or a wilderness. It can be as simple as just being near a tree. It does really positive things in our brains and in our bodies, and it makes us feel better because, as you said, we are part of nature.
Part of your book is the theme of the book is poaching. You know, the poachers in the story. When you started this book, obviously you sort of had some of the ideas about those walks you spoke about. Did it start with the idea that you wanted to highlight these environmental themes and find a story from it, or did the story kind of naturally evolve and the element of poachers was always something you were concerned about? And how did that all sort of come about to come up with that finished book, or that sort of arc of those 4 stories, if you sort of mean? How did that come about?
Yeah, it wasn't something I deliberately planned. It kind of arose in the story arc. And actually, the first spark of the story was something much closer to home, because I'd been fostering cats and kittens. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun if there was a character who fostered magic animals instead? So it was a much more very domestic spark. But, you know, I think that's sometimes where we start. We start in small ways, and then it can lead to thinking in much bigger ways, can't it?
That's amazing. Yeah, I've read about that. You're fostering. Do you still foster animals? Do you? Or no?
Not right now, no. But I would like to go back to it one day.
That must be really rewarding, but really heartbreaking at the same time, because you have to obviously give them back, don't you? And give them to other families. Yeah.
Yeah,
that must be really hard.
Bittersweet kind of feeling. That's exactly what I gave to Rowan in the books. So,
yeah.
You know, you're relieved and glad that the animal has a home forever, but you're sad because you've cared for it and you've loved it.
It definitely comes across. So I can hand over to you, Liz, to give us a little reading from that. Here we go.
Thank you so much. So this is chapter 11 I'm going to read, and Rowan has been captured by the baddies, and her new friend is a seal person, a selkie. They've just been in a shipwreck, and Isla, the selkie, has lent the other children some seal skins, and they've transformed into seals. The 3 seals swam together through night dark seas. Rowan delighted in the journey, exploring what this borrowed self could do. The sea was a hidden world, opening up to them. It was a playground, a pathway, a place of pure wonder. There was danger too, she realized, as they suddenly changed direction and sped away from a dark shadow in the depths below. Her senses were transformed. There were tickling bubbles and cold currents and swaying strands of kelp. There was a rich pattern of sound. rushing and clicking and swooshing. Rowan learned of creatures all around her, crawling, swimming, or floating. She discovered the joy of the hunt, chasing small fish and crunching down fresh, tasty food. They played together, rolling upside down, taking breaths of air and diving deep again, using tail and flippers and their strong, sleek bodies. It felt like complete freedom. Rowan could move in any direction. She could stay underwater for much longer than before. She could spin and roll and speed along. All night they chased and played and hunted, living the life of seals. But finally, nighttime faded. Dawn filtered down, sparkling, rippling shafts of watery grey-green light. Rowan realised she was tired, suddenly homesick for her own body. She was glad when Isla led them to the shore, to a sandy bay edged in rocks. Rowan heaved herself out of the shallow waves and up onto sand. She felt heavy and awkward now. Panic rose. How did she return to herself? Was she stuck in this seal body forever? She made herself think calmly. Isla wouldn't let them be trapped, she knew. Instead, she thought to the seal skin, "Thank you. May I return now?" Rowan focused hard, remembering the feel of her own self. Her body gave a strange shrug, and she felt a shiver that seemed to split her in two. Then she found herself gasping, face down on cold sand. Rowan was back in her own body once more, with the seal skin stretched out beside her. That's the end of that section.
Fantastic. That's great, Liz. Now, if you go to Liz's website, which I've got there, but I've got a little link here, which is lizflanagan.co.uk for teachers. There's some Wildsmith resources on there that people can download, and other teaching resources for some of your other books as well. And it's really good. So that you download those, and there's all sorts of PDFs and stuff like that from Liz's website. So Liz Flanagan, everybody. Thanks very much, Liz. Speak to you later on. Thanks very much. So before we get to my next guest, we just got a little video again I'd like to show you. It's an animation. It's a wonderful animation. It's from the World Environment Day program again, and it's called The Letters. So that's a book from the World Environment Program, and it's focused on what women do to help protect the climate and about climate change as well. Now we're going to go back into my next guest. So here we go. This is the next book coming up. Do penguins like the cold? This man is an environmental historian. He's a polar expedition leader, and he's author of the Explorer's Sketchbooks, The Conquest of Everest. And this is his latest, Do Penguins Like the Cold, part of a series. So please put your hands together. Let's welcome to Dr. Huw Lewis-Jones. Hello, Huw. How are you, sir?
Hello, everyone. I'm very well, thanks. Hi, kids.
Lovely to have you on. Lovely to have you on. Now, before we get into your book, which we have here, tell us where have you just come back from? Because you just come back from a bit of an expedition, haven't you?
That's right. Well, hello from Cornwall and welcome to my kitchen. But yes, just a few days ago, I was on expedition on our ship in the North Atlantic, visiting some remote islands in the Faroe Islands. Maybe you can find that on a map, looking for special seabirds and some of my favorite seabirds, which are not just penguins, but puffins. Maybe some of you have heard of puffins. We all know what puffins are.
What did you find? So what's that? So what do you find? There's massive colonies there. I don't know anything about that. What's that?
We're basically at the moment trying to understand the way in which bird populations are getting on in our changing world. We're very lucky here in Britain. We have some of the biggest colonies of seabirds in the whole world. Britain is really, really important on the edge of this cold ocean. But as you go farther north, it's perhaps sometimes more difficult to find birds. So that's the thing that I like to do most of all, exploring in little boats, looking for wildlife.
Sounds like my idea of heaven, actually, Huw. I forgot to be said. So talking about birds. So here we go. This is your latest. I do the slow reveal. Dun 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 dun. Do penguins like the cold? There we go. Run backwards. There we go. Do penguins like the cold? So obviously, this is a book about penguins. But sort of tell us a little bit more about what we can expect from the book. So tell us a little bit more about. I'll hand over to you to tell us a bit more about it. Here we go.
Yeah, well, look, this is a nature non-fiction book. So it's filled with all kinds of interesting facts, great information about the life of these amazing birds. There are 18 different types of penguins all around the world. They're all different. They've all got amazing super skills and powers, but also all kinds of interesting stories around the things that people are doing today to try and help penguins. Like other animals, of course, in this changing climate, penguins are suffering and struggling. Our oceans are warming, and the things that they eat are also moving around. So it's really important to look at animals, specific animals, and try and understand what we can do to help them.
Did you you say obviously you've got a love of birds sort of in general in that sort of sense, but how much did you sort of know about penguins before you sort of started this book or started the whole research for this the whole expedition and doing that?
Well, I am happy to admit I am a total penguin nerd. I'm very lucky. I teach during the day, I write at night, but in my holidays, I get to lead expeditions, sometimes to Antarctica in the south and sometimes to the North Pole itself. I checked this morning, I have over 40 penguins in my house. Some of them are big, some of them are very small, some of them are quite nice to look at. Some even wear orange hats. Who knew? I think probably most of you have got a penguin in your house living, maybe a cuddly toy. So they're one of the world's most popular birds, but I've been very lucky to see them in the wild, taking photographers and filmmakers and people just like ourselves to go and see them and photograph them.
So you had that sort of love from a young age, did you? Just sort of fascination with them in that sense?
I did, actually. It usually comes from our parents and grandparents. Yeah. My grandfather was an explorer. He went to...
Was a penguin? Sorry.
Yeah, was a penguin.
Yeah.
Maybe we're all descended from penguins. Did you know?
Yeah, I know. This is a whole new fact. This is a whole new thing.
Did you know? Oh, your grandma's not a penguin, but millions of years ago, there were dino penguins, some as big as, I don't know, a baby elephant. Huge penguins and all kinds of other amazing creatures that used to roam about on our planet.
So that is not known, is it? That's never really known, that one.
There are all kinds of amazing dynamics. So this penguin here is called Pachydiptes, and about 30 years ago, it's a penguin that's taller than your teacher, bigger than your dad. In fact, weighed about as much as a giant panda. So a pretty big penguin. Unfortunately, Pachydiptes and many of the other dino penguins aren't around anymore. But as I said, we have 18 amazing species of penguins, all of which are definitely worth caring about and learning more about.
And one of the things I love about this book is that I've got some pictures. I mean, you just showed a couple of the illustrations here. So this is illustrated by Sam Caldwell, isn't it?
That's right.
And this is great because this is like the beginning of it. And what you get when you get this book is that Huw and Sam together, so all of them illustrated together, it's done so they're kind of leading you on an expedition to this area themselves. Obviously, Huw goes, but you can see Huw and Sam there, so it's brilliant. How does that kind of work with Sam then? Does he come with you, or was that just a construct of the book? How does that all come about? So I did actually just show you these other illustrations here, Huw, before we go to that. So this is kind of the opening of the book, and then there's the illustration you just showed us about the different penguins, but fantastic illustrations. But how does that kind of work with you and Sam in terms of illustrating the book and all the rest of it?
It's different on every book. I'm the author. Sam Caldwell in Scotland is the illustrator. Amazing artist. I haven't yet taken him on an actual voyage, but I hope to. I was actually, as I say, up in north of Scotland in the Atlantic. No, on these books, and there are others, there's Do Bears Poop in the Woods. Some of you might have heard that too. We take the readers on an imaginary expedition all around the world to certain habitats, but also speaking to experts and scientists and guides. In this penguin book, we even go up into space, but also dive deep down into the ocean. Did you know an emperor penguin can dive down almost 600 meters in search of its favorite food, which is squid? It can hold its breath for up to 20 minutes. Amazing stuff. And you can see all these different kinds of animal adventures as we go through the pages, learning more about the penguins in it.
That's amazing.
But instead of reading, I'll share some interesting questions, because as I said, this book is filled with interesting stuff. And as I said, there are 18 species of penguin. Don't worry, there won't be a test, but there's loads of interesting things to learn. Did you know there are dino penguins? What do penguins eat? Do penguins want to fly? Do you smell like a penguin? Can you speak penguin? Why are penguins important? And how can we help? Do penguins really dance? And did you know some penguins live in cities? Penguins have families. Do all penguins look the same? Does anything eat penguins? Would you eat a penguin? I hope not. Maybe just chicken. Why are penguins so popular? Can technology help penguins? So there's all kinds of things for you to think about. And not just penguins, of course. I'm very lucky to have seen penguins in Antarctica, but all animals are equally important. The birds in your back garden, even the pigeons or the seagulls you see in your cities, all of these animals are worth our care and our attention and our love. And that's often the best way to help. Today, I think, is World Environment Day. We have a World Penguin Day in April and a World Penguin Awareness Day. Maybe you could organise a penguin party, or in your school, a penguin club, to learn more about these amazing animals. Maybe even raise some money for animal charities. That's certainly one way we can do our bit to help other people appreciate animals, perhaps as much as you do.
Well, so you just mentioned there, just quickly, sort of what technology is doing to sort of help these animals. And as we said, there's and as Patricia said as well, there are lots of people doing an awful lot of good to help all kinds of animals and wildlife, forests, environments all over the world. A lot of people, and more people doing, which is really, really amazing. So in what ways is say technology to helping penguins and for positive change?
Absolutely. Technology isn't always a bad thing. I know our parents tell us to get off our screens, but actually increasingly conservationists, people who care about animals and study animals in the field, are using technology. To study penguins is difficult. You have to go to remote places. But amazingly, scientists working with NASA are able to discover whole new penguin colonies using photographs from space, satellite imagery. Also, conservationists are using drone cameras, flying drones expertly above colonies to help count population numbers, attaching cameras to some species of penguins to try and understand more about their feeding habits. As I said, as our oceans are warming and penguins are facing more threats. There are ways that you can get involved too. Even AI, advanced information, is helping conservationists count and understand penguins even better. It's up to you, really. That's the key. Technology can only help us so far. You've got to care about animals in the first place to want to join in.
I bet you just said about the drones. I bet the drones have been an amazing help in terms of, like, as you said, locating things and obviously not scaring them away with men going in there or boats or, you know, helicopters or whatever it is going over the top. So it's amazing. And round of applause. Thank you very much, Huw Lewis-Jones. Thank you, Huw. Thanks very much. Last guest. She is the winner of the Waterstones Children's Book Prize 2024 and the best-selling middle grade hardback debut for 2023. So it's been a good year or so for the first book in her series, Greenwild, The World Behind the Door. You can see this is not that book. This is the second book, Greenwild, The City Beyond the Sea. This is the sequel. So let's welcome the author of the book, the wonderful Pari Thomson. First of all, huge congratulations on the book of the year. For you. Is your first book? Was it your first book?
It was my first book. Yeah, I know. I'm in shock. I'm as shocked as you are, Mr. Dilly.
Well, it's brilliant. It's a wonderful book. So I mean, it's a brilliant thing. Now, okay, so let's tell us a little bit about this. If the children haven't read these books before, tell us a little bit about this world of Greenwild. So how does it kind of start? Because obviously now we're into the sequel, but how do we sort of find our main characters at the beginning? So I hand over to you to tell us a little bit about this world and the main characters at the beginning of your books, and then we can talk about how they kind of ended up in this sequel. So I hand over to you for that. Here we go.
Yeah, so Greenwild, my first book, is about an 11-year-old girl called Daisy Thistledown, whose journalist mother goes missing in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. And Daisy, who's been left behind at a horrible boarding school, knows that it's up to her to escape and to find out what has happened to her mother. In the process, she steps through a secret hidden door and finds a magical world called the Greenwild. It's a world where plant magic is real, where there are milk chocolate trees and lily pad boats and plants that want to like bite your hand off, and where Daisy might also find out the answer to what has happened to her missing mother. So that is how the first book begins. And then in the second book, Daisy and her friends find themselves discovering a magical city beyond the sea, as you can see from the title and the cover here.
So it's brilliant. So I read somewhere that you said that you wrote Greenwild, I think this is your words, I hope it's your words, as a love letter to the beauty of the natural world, which is a wonderful thing to say as well, and a rallying cry to protect it. So you've given us a kind of a little glimpse into those initial characters. We'll talk a bit more about the plot a little bit of this book in a moment. But what was, I suppose a bit like I asked Liz, really, what was your kind of, was the kind of like you had these feelings anyway and you wanted to put them into a story, or did the story, because you were already like that, naturally evolve, you know, because you had them? Or what came first, the message or the story? How did that kind of work? See what I mean?
I think they both sparked off each other. I think I've always loved being outside and in nature, very much as Liz was saying. And I also live near an amazing place called Kew Gardens in London. And it's an incredible botanical garden that is full of giant glass houses and incredible plants, huge lily pads, any kind of amazing plant, orchid, carnivorous plant you could imagine. And when I was looking at these plants, they made me think some of these plants seem a little bit magic. And then I wondered, what would it be like if nature really was magic? What would that world look like? And that is the Greenwild in my stories. So that's kind of how it came about.
Well, if you think, I mean, I suppose the thing is that it is magic anyway, isn't it? And the fact that it does work and does do that and grows like that and spots like that.
Exactly.
It's an incredible thing. It's an amazing thing. I mean, and we can say how it works. We're not really sure why it works like that. So it's kind of like, say, it's something else. What did you discover about nature, and in this book discover about the oceans? Because obviously this book focuses on oceans and stuff. As you were kind of researching these books, were any things that really popped into mind? Because I suppose the thing is, there's so much you could put in it, isn't it? I mean, you're putting so much could go into it. So what did you discover, and how did you sort of edit out the bits that you wanted, kind of thing? So I hand over to you. Just kind of, there's two questions there, really.
Yeah. So as you were saying, I mean, the oceans are so huge. They're kind of unimaginably huge and deep. And I think that one amazing fact that I love is that more people have walked on the surface of the moon than have explored the very, very deepest parts of the ocean. So the ocean in so many ways is this incredible undiscovered world, and it is full of all sorts of astonishing plants and animals. So there are incredible coral reefs that are, brightly, brightly multicolored. There are fish that glow in the dark and have kind of giant spines. There are dolphins that actually are incredibly playful and often play with humans. So I try to kind of pull a little bit of all of those different elements out and just sort of explore the magic in all of those. So I really had a lot of fun putting them into the book.
And it comes across. So in this book, so the city beyond the sea is obviously, as we said, about it goes into the oceans. Can you tell us a little bit more about? I mean, sort of give us a sort of an inkling of how Greenwild started. So where do we find our characters in this book without sort of giving too much away? And can you sort of tell us a little bit about, well, beginning of their arc, as it were, in the story? So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in this book, Daisy realizes that she's never going to be able to fight the people who have imprisoned her mother unless she gets the support of the mysterious people of a place called Greenwild. And Greenwild is a people who have ocean magic and water magic. So Daisy is going to need their support for the battle that is ahead. The only problem is that everyone thinks that Greenwild is legendary and that it doesn't really exist. So how on earth is she going to get there? And actually, the way that she manages it is by almost hitching a ride with a traveling theatre called the Nautilus Theatre, who go around the whole of the magical world, including the mysterious Greenwild, performing plays. So I had a lot of fun putting in a kind of slightly crazy theatre troupe into this book. There are lots of new characters to get to know. There's a kind of very eccentric wardrobe mistress. So, you know, if you enjoy theatre plays, yeah.
I know, I've done a few.
So in this bit that I'm going to read, Daisy and her friends have decided that they need to explore the coral reefs around Greenwild because they've heard a rumour that these coral reefs are not doing well, and they need to find out what's happening in order to see if they can help and if they can try to fix it. So here they are under the water, diving in the coral reef. The coral rose above them endlessly, all the way to the surface of the water. The light, Daisy realized, was coming from the pure white sand on the ocean floor, rich with magic and bright as the summer sky at noon. Daisy stopped and swam in place. She looked sideways and saw that Indigo was looking back at her with the same wonder she felt on her own face. They signaled to each other and swam deeper, until the lightness of the water dazzled them with diamonds of light, and among the coral on the shining sand they saw giant pearls in oyster shells, each one the size of a fist. No wonder, thought Daisy, people risked their lives for such pearls. Each one would be worth a king's ransom. Many shells, she saw, were empty. Slowly, she and Indigo swam the length of the reef, and this is where they saw it begin, the great bleaching. The coral in these places was bone white and stripped of life. No anemones opened and closed their petals here. No starfish clung to the side of the cliffs. There was only silence, on and on into the distance. Daisy stopped swimming. Silently, she broke off a large piece of white coral. Beside her, Indigo did the same, his mouth set in a flat line. Daisy knew that they needed to fix the coral and bring the life back to the reef. Without needing to signal, they began to swim upwards, rising through levels of water that darkened and cooled as they rose. Daisy's lungs worked hard as she pushed herself up. Then she saw a vast shape move towards her in the light of the head torch. It was an enormous stingray, as wide and long as a truck, with a great whip of a tail that sparked with electricity. She darted out of the way just in time, but the tail caught her head torch and she felt it crack against her forehead. When her vision cleared, the stingray was gone, but so had everything else. The sea was dark. Indigo had vanished. So I will leave you there, and if you want to find out what happens next, you'll have to keep reading.
I have to keep reading. That's fantastic, Pari. I think this is a thing you said as well, that, again, I'm just quoting from something else, but it was just a lovely quote. It said that this book will remind them that there is still hope to be found in good people and in the wild beauty of the world around us. And I think that's a wonderful thing, just to sort of echo your book. Obviously, that does have that eco theme through for both these books. But it's also a book about family, friendship, obviously lots of adventure in there as well, and courage, which is what we all need to sort of make a stand of things in life. So, Pari, what we're going to do is we're going to say goodbye to you briefly. We're going to go into part 2 and then bring you back on with everybody else for our author panel. But for now, round of applause. Thank you very much. Pari Thomson there. Thank you. We've got a few questions for you all from some schools as well. So we're going to put some of these to you and a few sort of little quiz questions where you can just shout out the answers to at your leisure as we go through. So this is, we'll start with you, Liz, then Huw, and then you, Pari, and then if we can get Patricia about that, would be great. So this from Blowers Green Primary School in Dudley. Big question. What is the biggest threat to our planet at present? Now, this may be as you see it or within the knowledge we all have, I suppose. So, Liz, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think like we've talked about before, like the biggest problem is also the biggest solution. It's human beings, isn't it? And, you know, I think as we've heard already, we can all do stuff, but we need the big companies and the governments. They're the ones who've got to take action, and we can let them know that.
Fantastic. Huw, do you echo that, or have you got something else you'd like to add to that?
100%. Of course.
Yeah.
Humans are the most destructive animal on the planet, yet also we have the potential to be the most kind, clever, caring and positive creature on this planet too, if only we'd get our acts.
Mm-hmm.
I know. What about you? What are you, Pari?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I kind of couldn't put it better.
It is, but I think that's the thing. It's endlessly frustrating to me what Huw said there, because as he said, we can do so much wonderful stuff, and yet there's always that other bit. I'm a great lover of history, and I really read a lot of history. And I nothing to do with this topic, but I just read a huge book about ancient Egypt, 3,500 years of civilization, and you think no one seems to learn. And that's quite an incredible thing. But as you said, there's always good things come from it. What we're going to do is it's a quick. You'll know the answer to this because Patricia, I think, has already given you the answer. If you were listening, you're given the answer. So what we're going to do is, we're going to put this quick question up. It's all environmental quiz questions. I'm just going to intersperse this bit with a few of them. You can put your hands up in your classroom and see if you can guess it first. So I'll put it up there and I'll give it a few seconds. And if you know the answer, just then I'll say go and you can just shout out the answer. We just be like that. So here we go. So this is it. So how much of the food we grow gets thrown away? Is the answer A, none of it? Is it B, 1/10? Is it C, 1/3? Or is it C, or is it D, sorry, 1/100th? Get thinking, kids. Patricia's already mentioned it. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to our panel now. First one to shout out. 1, 2, 3. What is it? No one knows.
Was it 1/10?
Gone. I can't remember. Yeah.
Way too much. Way too much.
Way too much. Do you know what the answer is? Anyone know?
No.
Was it 1/10?
No, it's actually 1/3. Unbelievable.
Oh.
1/3. Yeah, this is over a third of all food produced globally goes to waste. The UK throws away around 9.5 million tons of food waste in a single year, even though about 8.4 million people in the UK are in food poverty. So
that's crazy. Imagine you've got 3 custard creams and you're throwing one away every time. You'd never do that, would you?
You'd never do that. Not to a custard cream. Must be joking. No, absolutely not. And so here we go. Let's get another school question up. Here we go. So St. John Fisher Catholic College, Newcastle. What one thing do you think is the best way to help protect the planet? Pari, I'll go to you for this one.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many things you can do, but I think the best thing you can do is to use your voices and to whether that is writing to your MP, talking to the people in your family and your friends, shouting about it, online, writing about it in stories. I think use your voice to fight for the planet and the protection that it needs, because everyone has a voice and nobody is too small to make a difference.
That's brilliant advice. Anything to add to that? I come to you, Huw, for anything to add to that? Or
I get asked this all the time. Obviously, I want to say hug penguins, but that's not going to save the planet. When I'm asked what's the one thing that one person can do, my answer is simple: don't be the one person. So the best answer is to join with other people, whether it's joining a club at school, whether it's joining with other people, as Pari said, to write a letter to your MP. But together, we can get energy and optimism and hope from each other. Doing things on your own is very, very difficult. But there are millions of people around the world who care about the environment as much as I hope we all do.
Fantastic. Patricia, what about yourself? What one thing do you think is the best way to help protect the planet? I don't know if you heard what Pari said earlier, but anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I wanted to agree with Huw also. I think the best thing you can do is to raise your voice. I think that it's only really by working together and working with a combined political will that we can make a difference on a large scale. I mean, it's fine to conserve at home. It's great to do that, but we really need to speak to we need to communicate with everyone so that we can really convince the people who make decisions in the world.
Fantastic. And what about you? What about you, Liz? Anything to add to that, or do you just kind of say yes, amen to all that?
Yes, all of the above. But also, we have different access to what we can do, don't we? So, for some people, you might be able to do something small and local. Other people might do some research, or as everybody said, you could support one of the amazing organisations or charities doing wonderful work around the world. So, it might be different for different people.
I think that's the thing. Is everyone can do something. I think that it's a bit like saying if everyone smiled tomorrow, a stranger, would the world be a better place? And the answer is yes, and it's free, and you can do it tomorrow. And yes, it's a simple sort of thing in that sort of sense. This next question, I think, is from your book, Patricia. So again, you should know the answer to this. And then we're not into your book anymore. So here we go. So this is it. Which is worse for the planet? A, cow burps. B, cow farts. C, human farts. Or D, ladybird farts. That's from Patricia's book. I didn't make it up. I think it's from Patricia's book. Is that from your book? I think it is. So anyone know what's the worst for the planet? So hold on there, kids. What do you think, kids? What do you think it is? A, B, C, or D? Anyone like to shout out first? Huw, yes.
It's got to be burps, isn't it? A, cow.
I'm going to guess cow
farts. Is it burps or farts? I don't know. Which one is it?
I'm going to go with B.
It's burps. It's got to be burps.
Got to be burps. Patricia, what is it? Which one is it? Do you know?
It is burps. It is burps.
burps.
Cow burps, they emit a tremendous amount of methane, which is a greenhouse gas.
So I think methane, if I'm right in saying this, is 80 times more powerful than carbon monoxide or dioxide, or whatever it is, and trapping heat in the atmosphere. So it's pretty bad. So what comes out both end of cows, for all of us really, but both end of cows is a bad contributor to obviously global warming and therefore part of climate change. Okay, another question from school. Emma is a home educator from Gosport. Do you have a favourite endangered, almost extinct animal, and how can we help stopping its extinction? So shouldn't have messed in there. But what about you, Liz? Do you have a favourite sort of animal that's kind of would be on that list? I know this list changes all the time, sometimes for the worst, but sometimes for the better.
Yeah, it's so hard, isn't it? It's really difficult to choose one. So I think probably one of the really rare cats whose numbers have got, really low, whether it's a Scottish wild cat or a snow leopard or something like that, because that's my love of cats, you see, coming out.
Yeah. So one of the cats. What about Huw? Are we going to the birds, or is there any particular penguins that are really endangered?
Some of them, there's the Galapagos penguin, for example, the only penguin that swims into the northern hemisphere. There's barely 1,000 left. But actually, extinction is about rate of decline as much as numbers. So there are some types of penguin where there are actually hundreds of thousands, which might sound like a lot, but their rate of decline in those numbers has been so rapid in the last few decades that it's really worrying. I would say all birds are amazing. Local birds here in Britain, garden birds are under threat, and things like puffins, so beautiful. It's a terrible shame to think that actually within a generation we might not see puffins anymore.
That would be awful. Patricia, what about yourself?
Well, I was thinking of a bird as well, which is a bird I can see outside of my window every once in a while, the eastern meadowlark. It's not endangered, but it's almost endangered. And that's because its habitat is being lost by development. It likes to live in brushy areas and develop. And when people develop and they build, they mow down its nests. It has a beautiful whistling call. I love to hear it. And it's just an example of many kinds of birds whose habitats are being lost to development.
And it's so, we've sort of touched on this, all of us, sort of during the program in various ways. but it's so we got just a tiny little sort of garden out here, but we have some sparrows keep coming in it, and they're just the most beautiful animals, and it's so wonderful to watch, and there's huge joy just from watching them and seeing them and how they behave and stuff, and it's just really good for you, let alone anything else. So it's crazy on this. What about you, Pari? Yeah, any particular animal at all?
Oh, I agree with everything that everyone said. I think I'm going to say elephants, though. I used to live in India as a child and I fell in love with elephants, and they are just such fascinating, enormously intelligent creatures, and they live in these wonderful, close-knit families. So, you know, I think they're just so special.
Portfield Primary Academy, Chichester. What would you say was the one small change we can all do as individuals that would really make an impact? So I guess from the children watching, just some of this we much mentioned already, but you know, in their classrooms or with their class or at their school or with their family. Liz, what would you say?
I mean, it depends where you live. It could be a really tiny thing, like putting out some water for birds in the summer, or you know, if you have a garden, you could put some flowers that are great for insects. You could do a little bug hotel. You know, it could be a really small thing.
Fantastic. What about you, Huw?
Well, I agree. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Depending on where you live, maybe a journey cycling to school is going to help. Maybe not eating meat at breakfast, you know, a simple thing, choosing a different kind of breakfast this morning. But I agree totally with Patricia's book. Maybe convincing your parents to vote for politicians who care about the planet. That could be the one greatest thing you do when you get home tonight.
That's a good idea, especially with an election coming up. That's great. Patricia, what about yourself?
You know, I would say eat more plants.
Yeah.
We love plants, but we love animals just as much. And if we go to a slightly more plant-based diet, it can really make a big difference in the world.
Make a huge difference. And Pari, what about yourself?
I feel like everyone's covered all the main things. Yeah, I'm just gonna bow down to your expertise.
That's fantastic. Okay, here's a quick question. This is quite amazing, actually. The answer to this: if all the wind around the UK coast could be harnessed for energy, how much of our energy needs could be met by this source alone? This is fascinating. Is it A, none, B, all, or C, double, or D, 3 times of our energy needs? What do you think it could be? Any idea? Who wants to have a quick guess? Huw, what do you think?
It's got to be loads. More than our energy needs. But of course, we should be reducing our energy needs too. Read more books. But yeah,
read more books. This is the thing. I'll just put this out there. So this is incredible. The wind around the UK coast could meet 3 times the UK's energy needs if it was harnessed for energy. But we'd need 7,000 of the biggest turbines available, 140 sites, and obviously we'd have to hope for plenty of windy weather. But it's quite an incredible thing, because when you look, I mean, 7,000 is a lot, but 7,000 isn't something that's kind of completely, it's not like 7 million, you know, off the charts. So it's quite an amazing fact, that base. So Caulfield Primary School, London, what can we as a school do to help? Pari, any other thoughts on that as a school?
Yeah, I think you could, for example, have one day a week when you have like a vegetarian day, so that as a school you're eating less meat. Just one day a week you'd reduce that by 20%. And if you had kind of green space in your school, you could plant bee-friendly flowers to help look after our bees, who are so essential for so much of our life on Earth. And those are just a couple small thoughts.
That's fantastic. Anything you'd like to add to that, anybody? Because that's they're 2 amazing things you can do. Liz, any thoughts on that?
I guess I'd echo what Patricia said earlier about the food waste. You know, make sure that the food waste is being recycled. Yeah.
And we'll watch how much we eat and how much we throw away. So it's great. Patricia, anything else? Because obviously there's huge amount about this in your book, really.
Yeah, I agree about planting a green space, even if it's just a patch, even if it's just something in your classroom. I think being in touch with something that's growing is really a good way for kids to sort of experience the earth and have a direct connection with it.
Absolutely. And Huw, what about yourself?
All of that. And, you know, if your school doesn't yet have a nature club or an environmental club, start one. Pester your teachers to start one. And it doesn't require a garden necessarily. Maybe you can have a book club first week, reading some of these amazing books you've heard about today, and encouraging and thinking of some cool ideas in ways that your school in your specific place might help. Oh yes, and adopt a penguin.
And adopt a penguin, of course, adopt a penguin. Adopt a penguin. We can all do something to help, and as these authors have all demonstrated, all their books have those themes. Overall, they're about hope and positive change that we can all affect. So I think they've all been amazing guests today and really given that off. So I want to say thank you very much to Liz Flanagan. Let's give Liz a round of applause. All of us like this. A round of applause. Dr. Huw Lewis-Jones and the Penguins, of course, and the Penguins. Round of applause. Patricia Daniels. Patricia. And last but not least, Pari Thomson. Round of applause to Pari, please. I give everyone a big wave. Goodbye, everybody. And we'll say goodbye. Thank you so much. We have a draw-along coming in a minute. So this draw-along is from a book called Nature's Fascinating Friendship. It's by an illustrator called Kerry Hyndman and written by Mike Hills. Amazing book. It's about sort of a journey around the world to discover how animals, plants, and microscopic organisms develop fascinating friendships to survive and thrive. But no point me talking about it. I'm going to hand over now to Kerry to get your pens, papers, everything ready. Now, just a quick thing about this draw along. It's really amazing draw along. It's probably going to warrant you going back and looking at it again and kind of slowing it down in stages. So this is Kerry Hyndman with Nature's Fascinating Friendships draw along.
Thanks, Mr Dilly. Hi, I'm Kerry Hyndman and I'm an illustrator. And this is my new book, Nature's Fascinating Friendships. And I'm going to do a drawing from this today for World Environment Day. So this book is about symbiotic relationships, which are relationships in nature where both parties get something from it. So we've got lots of examples in our book of plants and insects. Some more insects there. Birds and flowers. Hippos and fish. So all sorts of animals and creatures from all over the world, all different environments. And we talk about how they have teamwork in nature. So let's get drawing. So the animal friendship I've chosen to illustrate is the badger and the coyote. And these guys are some of the oldest examples in Native American folklore of symbiotic relationship. So to start with, I'm going to use a pencil very lightly and mark out where I want my characters to sit. So I'm going to use a triangle here for the coyote shape and a big sausage there for the badger, with the baseline where the grass will go. I then start building up the shapes of the animals by using circles and squares and curved lines. So we've got the curves of the body and the neck, and I'm using larger sausages for the body and the tail, and then the smaller triangles for the ears. Then I use straighter lines and sharper angles to get the legs. Once I've got the shapes to mark out where the body is, I'll go around those shapes using a pencil to just mark the outlines. The next stage is to use a felt tip pen to add a thicker outline around the animal. I'm using jagged lines to show the fur. I'll then add the nose and the eye to show him gazing across to where the badger is. I do the same thing with the badger. I mark out his head and body using sausages and circle shapes. And then draw around his outline using a thicker pencil. I then use a felt tip pen again to give him a bit of a furry outline. Make sure I get the areas that his body are a little bit hairier to be more jagged. and draw his eye and nose gazing back at the coyote. Once I've rubbed out the pencil lines, I then start colouring it in. So I'm just using a colouring pencil here, making sure that the lines I'm using are kind of short around the nose and the head. And then as I work down the body, the fur will get a bit thicker, and I change the direction that I'm colouring so that the fur matches the direction that it grows on the body. Once I've coloured it all in, I'll go back over the areas with shadow a little bit darker. So these will be the bits that the sun doesn't reach. So it will be under the head, on his back legs, under the tummy, and the bottom of the tail. Then I do the same with the badger, making sure I get those wiry looking hairs by doing thick dark pencil lines in the direction that the hair grows again. Then using heavier pencil lines to make the areas under his tummies and arms and head a little bit darker to add a bit of depth to the drawing. Then finally, using a brush pen, I'm just going to add some grass to their environment. So they live in the grasslands of North America. And there you go, a couple of symbiotic superpals. Thanks very much for watching. Goodbye. Back to you, Mr Dilly.
Well, thanks to Kerry there. And Nature's Fascinating Friendships is out now. We haven't finished yet. We've got one more thing to do. We have the wonderful Gabby Dawnay. Gabby, a new book, A Field Guide to Spring. This is the first book, excuse me, in a new series, Wild by Nature, inspired by the forest school movement, which you may have at your school, designed to teach young children how to engage with nature from season to season. And the book features lyrical poems. It's got hands-on crafts and activities, scientific facts, and identifier pages to help you spot different animals sort of locally and out about on walks and so on. Today, Gabby will be basically speaking or reciting a couple of poems from the book. So I'll hand over to Gabby now.
Thanks, Mr Dilly. My name's Gabby, and I'm sitting in this beautiful garden on a really gorgeous spring day, and I want to introduce you to some poems from my new book, which is called A Field Guide to Spring. It's been really beautifully illustrated by Doreen Brewers, and it's full of all sorts of poems and hands-on activities, fascinating facts and things to do. And it's quite small, so you can take it outside and you can read outside and you can do activities outside and explore and learn in nature. The first poem that I'd like to read is called Spring is Singing. And look at Doreen's beautiful illustrations here, all these tulips. So this is a poem to read underneath a tree, which is where I'm sitting. Something's stirring underneath as buds appear for every leaf. The sleeping bulbs are slowly rooting, creeping stalks and branches shooting. In the water, there are lots of tiny, slimy bubble dots. Twitching tails and legs are showing. Watch the inky wrigglers growing. Here's a warm and feathered nest where tiny eggs together rest until a wobble, then a crack, and busy ducklings start to quack. Hello tadpoles, hello chicks, hello green and sprouting sticks. Hello spring, it's time to heat the sleepy earth beneath our feet. Days are longer, mornings lighter, even sunshine seems much brighter. Hello grass and hello flowers, hello sun and springtime showers. Wake up, garden. After snow, your leafy beds begin to grow. And from the winter's icy rain, the whole of nature wakes again. Hello, singing in the air. Spring is springing everywhere. If if you have a listen, you can hear there are loads of birds singing in the garden. They're almost noisy. And an aeroplane. The second poem that I'd like to read from A Field Guide to Spring is called Marvellous Mud, and it's a poem to read with wellies on. Mushy and muddy, or squashy and scoopy, mud is just lovely because it's so gloopy. Oozing and squelchy, or stuck in the mucky, mud can be belchy and patter cake yucky. Dig in the dirt, find a big stick to mix it, now water it, shape it, then bake it to fix it. Down in the earth, all the worms underground are turning and churning to move it around. Pushing through mush with a squash and a shove, earthworms are munching the mud that they love. Oozing and squashy, it's lovely and muddy, cooling and mushy. Oh, mud is my buddy. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for having me, Mr Dilly, and it's back to you.
Thank you very much to Gabby, Dawnay there. And A Field Guide to Spring is also out now. It's been brilliant to have you with us today for World Environment Day 2024. As I think I said earlier, one of the things about humankind is that we can be pretty destructive, but we can also be incredibly creative and incredibly hopeful and inspiring to each other. And we can all have the choice of that. We can all be part of that change. And thank you to all my guests. Thank you for all their wonderful books. And thank you again for all of you watching. And it's goodbye from me. And it's goodbye from me. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, my friends. Goodbye.